we were talking about the CP4 pumps, and like what was the deal? What was that? I think it was around 2011. I think it's 2011 the CP4s came out. And so we didn't know anything about it. Plus, most of those trucks are under warranty. When we first started seeing trucks, they're like right at the edge of warranty, some of them. And they were coming through, and like it was going to need a whole new fuel system, because the low pressure side fails, pumps metal shards into the high pressure side, pumps it through the rails, pumps it through the injectors, pumps it back to the fuel tank. And so, we only saw one or two, so I didn't think much of it. And so then we started seeing more of it. It's like, that's kind of weird, right? So you start looking, and you're like, CP3 pump would have been high volume, high pressure. And then, so what's the difference with the CP4? Well, it was supposed to be low volume, or it is low volume, high pressure, so it still has pressure. And I'm sure there's some really smart engineers who figured out that'd be somehow more efficient. Something's better, because the engineers are smarter than we are. We start seeing this, and I'm like, why is that happening? Why is that happening? And then you start looking at the Ford, and the Ford had a CP4 too. They change those over. It's like they don't fail as much on the Ford, right? So you're like, why is that? And then you start looking, and it's like, okay, so when you service one of those trucks and you prime a Ford, you turn the key, and it primes the fuel system. Turn the key, shut it off, turn it on, and the electric fuel pump primes the fuel system, so the low pressure side is full of fuel. So you don't see as many failures. And I thought, what if on the Chevys, why are they failing? They didn't have a lift pump. And I think Jimmy told me 2023, Duramax finally put a lift pump in there to push pump to the fuel. But before, the low pressure side of that pump was pulling fuel from the tank. And so then you start thinking, well, you could just crank it and crank it and crank it and suck fuel to it. But if you don't hit that primer pump, the fuel header has a little primer button on it. So typically if you service it, pump, maybe crank a little bit, you don't let it start, just crank real quick, pump. And then once that button is firm on the fuel filter header, then you're like, okay, we've got good low pressure fuel, and you can start the truck. On the Chevys. But I always wondered, like, is that how these things are starting to fail? Like cavitating inside, like somebody does a service, they don't really know what they're doing. They put the fuel filter on, and they just keep cranking on it until the low pressure side fills up with fuel. And so I'm not a professional expert, but I believe that's what happened. The only difference is one has a lift pump, one doesn't. But the Fords are still going to fail too. And it's such a huge price to fix that problem. And the only other thing, and I never finished researching this, I'm like, well, Cummins and Dodge and Mopar, they went with the CP4 too. The only thing I ever read on the Dodges is that they recalled like 400,000 trucks or some crazy amount. I don't know what their fix was. I don't know what they did, but I know customers said, hey, I got to take my truck in for warranty work. And I said, what is it? And they said something about the injection pump. So I don't know what they did, how they made it different. I remember old injection pumps, if they failed, you could take them and get them rebuilt. Or if they sold you a new pump, they wanted the core back. Now, because of the aluminum housings and everything else, you just throw them in the garbage. So I don't know if it's as much the CP4 being the problem as it is the pumps just aren't made, I guess, the way they were made before. I don't know. I don't know. I just know this. If I had a friend who had a Duramax, say like, 2012, 2014, has a primer button, and they serviced it themselves, doing the fuel filter, I would just tell them, just make sure you pump that thing. I tell them all, because we work on a lot of different trucks, and you tell people, oh no, I service myself. I'm like, hey, make sure you do this, right? Just make sure you do this so the pump doesn't cavitate. Because when you can see, if you ever saw the inside of it, and I'm sure you can see a picture of it somewhere, it looks like the low side of the pump looks like when a camshaft has a roller lifter. So you know how the roller, and usually there's like in an International, they have H-clips to keep them orientated. In a 6.0, there's that plat, where the lifter fits in a certain way so the wheel can't turn sideways. But like in an International, if one of those H-clips breaks, it'll turn sideways and just, the roller will turn sideways and it'll just carve the camshaft until it's nothing, And so if you looked at that pump, to me, that's what it looks like, is a roller lifter. And when we took one apart, like, that had died, sure enough, that lobe that looks like a camshaft lobe and the roller, it had to have turned sideways because it just ate up that the cam lobe. So, and like I said, I'm not an engineer. I don't get paid to figure this stuff out. We just fix trucks with the parts that OE gives us or sells us. Yeah, but I mean, you see things because, always asking why. Like, I don't really remember. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't look at those prices every day. But I mean, if I'm, let's just throw out a stupid 10 grand.
Yeah.
I mean, because you need all the injectors, all the rails, you know what I mean? The pump, and the labor's not easy. And then to do it actually the right way, you have to take out the fuel tank and clean it. But the problem is you're cleaning it up metal that you can't see with your eye.